Hi everyone, my name is Johan, CTO and co-founder at Realm, and yeah, I think this is hopefully like a good follow-up to the last talk. So I'm going to talk more about Agentic RAG, and I will say that I think it was a good talk, and I feel like I could have held the same talk as Ed had. We have been thinking about like a lot of the same things at Realm as well. So I'm going to start with some examples here. I guess like the meta comment here is that I'll show you our product in a bit, but if you build a product which has like a chat interface where users like something that uses RAG, where users can like ask questions, the user is like doesn't realize that it's RAG under the hood, and they don't know that RAG is like makes one search and looks at some results and then answers based on those results. In the user side, it's like an AI that they can ask anything, so they kind of will ask the AI anything. So here I have like a list of different questions that you can kind of ask Realm. So the first one is just a simple one to basically prove that it works. It can do basic RAG, so I could ask like, how do we comply with GDPR? This is a very simple question. There is probably some document. I guess there's a bunch of like testing RFPs there, but anyways, there is some authoritative document on how we comply with GDPR, and like we want the RAG to find that, and then we answer based on that. So simple enough. Then, however, this is kind of a made-up question, but it could be something like. The question could be something like, find this contract we have with this, find the latest contract with this customer and list everything in the contract that relates to something, where I basically really want the agent to look at the whole document, because if it just like does RAG, finds some chunks from the document and looks at those chunks, then like we see here, I think, yeah, I basically asked it to list all headers in the documents, and I think if I like open the document, yeah, there is like 7, 8, which it didn't list, which like if you understand how RAG works, that's kind of natural. It found the best matching chunks and gave that to the agent, and the agent did what it could with that. Then another one could be that, oh shit. If I just like ask something like find all the linear tickets, like, and find and analyze all the linear tickets from some time period. I think here, like I asked for the last month, it said that there was, well, I guess it said that there was about 50, but I think like if I add the last 3, oh shit. If I ask for the last 3 months, it's gonna give us like a similar result, because like there was only enough space for about 50 tickets in the context. I guess it found a bit more, but either way, some examples of where this like basic RAG kind of falls short of just like finding stuff and like making a search and then answering based on that search. Yeah, there's like another kind of very real case that our customers might do, like ask about some like, oh yeah, this like the customer could also ask like find all deals that we won last month and tell me like why we won each of them, where you basically first need to find the deals we won, and then you need to like figure out why we won each of them. So you have to do multiple steps. So you need to do Agentic RAG. So yeah, it's simple, and I mean all of you have like used agentic tools for coding and so on. So it's basically applying the same principles to RAG. Yeah, I mean, there is downsides to this though. Of course, there's the latency, and then there's, I guess, as the theme of this event is context. There is the issue with context that if the agent does like multiple searches trying to find like whatever it's looking for, then that produces context, and the context window fills up, and it becomes slower and more expensive. So here I'll talk about basically two things. Actually, most of the first one. Hopefully this will be like very practical and just like kind of showing you some examples of, I put there like what to fill the context with, but basically like what are the tools that we want to give the agent to work with for this type of RAG use case. So first of all, obviously we want to give the agent some kind of search tool, and here I think it's good to note that like the better the search tool is here, the better the agentic RAG as well. But I think like relating to the previous discussion, I think it also depends a lot on like what type of data you have, like how much data you have, how complex the data is, whether you actually need good search or not. But so we give the agent a search tool that it can use to search. Then what can become an issue here is just, like I mentioned, the context. So say that every time we make a search, we kind of put 40k tokens of search results, or we give 40k tokens of search results to the agent. So here's like a hypothetical example that in that situation, if the agent needs to do multiple searches, it can easily become quite like expensive and slow. So say that kind of an agent does 5 searches. First it does 3 different searches, then it figures it needs to search for something else, so it does a 4th search, and then it does a 5th search, and then like the search results stay in the context, then you end up with basically like for these like 3 agent loops just from the search context, you end up with like 500k input tokens, and if you use like a more expensive model, which you probably want to do because like the better models are better at these like agentic flows and making decisions and so on. So then that like one RAG query would cost like $1.50 with Sonnet 4.5, which is probably not what you want. Of course, depends on the use case, but if it's something where users ask like fairly simple questions, like each question isn't worth like $1.50, so you can't do that. Cool. So what are some solutions? So one obvious one is, of course, to just like use a cheaper model. Like Gemini 3 Flash is fairly good at everything basically, but also kind of agentic workflows. So that helps you a bit. Of course, like for complex tasks, it's not gonna be as good because it's not as good of a model. So there's that downside. But even though you have a cheaper model, you still have this problem of like just a lot of search context or search results in the context. Then a second option, which is, for example, what we are doing, is to use basically have this like you have the main agent, and the main agent can call like a sub agent, or I call it the retrieval agent here, that's using a cheaper model. So basically, the main agent tells the retrieval model, hey, please, like, here's a kind of a task for you, and or it just gives a query, and then the cheaper model does the search. The cheaper model looks at the search results and basically provides a summary and references to the main model. And that way, in this example here, the main model will only get kind of like, say, 500 tokens or something like that for each search, where it's just like basically the answer, the summarization of the answer. You can also get like to a similar thing by basically kind of like after each search, before the next step, you like summarize all the previous search results. But yeah, if you want to do a kind of cache the context for the main agent, that doesn't necessarily work quite as well. Cool. That's the search tool. Then, yeah, this was the example I showed you. So what if I ask something like this, where I want the agent to actually like find something, but also read through it in its entirety? And you could solve this, or like solve some cases here by just like when you construct the like context, the output from the retrieval, you could just like have more context per document. But that like will cost more for the base case, and it won't like solve it in the general case. So the solution here is pretty simple. You do it the same way a human would do it. So you let the agent, or you give the agent the option to basically read a source in full. So it can read based on a reference from RAG. It can maybe also read by a URL or identifier, similar. Yet another type of question. So this was like in the beginning, the look at all our linear tickets from the last 3 months and do some analysis on them. So this could be something like also like analyze all our lost deals from last year. So what you could do here is just, or like the agent could kind of solve this maybe by itself. Basically, it would make one search, then it would check like, oh, did we find all the risks? Like, are there? You need some kind of metadata of like, was there more results that match the criteria? And if there were more, then it does another search. And if there was still more, then it does another search. You can probably understand why this is fairly slow. So kind of the way you can solve this, and we, for example, solve this is basically you still have the same retrieval agent, but now the main agent can ask the retrieval agent to kind of look through all of the sources that, or like all of the results that match these criteria. And yeah, basically that also means that you can do all the kind of searches and sub-agent runs in parallel, and then just like summarize the results, and it's faster. Yeah, I think I'll skip this one in the interest of time, but I like another thing in the same theme of like the users just assume that the AI models like, or in RAG the user will assume that there's an AI model that knows all the data that the RAG has access to. Sometimes they want to ask something based on like spreadsheet data, for example, and here the best solution is usually to, again, kind of do it in the way a human would do it. So maybe let the agent write some code to kind of like read the spreadsheet and then analyze the spreadsheet using code. Yeah, here's like a kind of a side note, but I think if you're building something like this, where most of the time the users might be asking fairly simple questions, you probably don't want to have like kind of all the agentic bells and whistles every time. So for this as well, there is like a very simple solution, which is that you have some kind of router that analyzes the user's query and decides like, should this be, does this need like the agentic loop, or could this just be a basic RAG? Cool. And my final slide. So the theme here is context, and basically all the tools I've talked about is things that the agent will use to like fill up the context. But by being smart there, you can kind of make sure that it doesn't use too much context, or like minimize the amount of context it uses. However, it's still gonna kind of, if you have a longer chat, for example, or if the agent just runs for longer, it's gonna eventually like fill up the context and then run out of context, or use more context than you would have liked. So basically what you need to do is just, you need to kind of drop some of that old context that's not relevant anymore, ideally without kind of confusing the agent or hurting performance, so on. So, like, again, some very practical, simple things you can do. So just you kind of have to keep some of the recent interactions in the context, otherwise the agent will just not know what to do. But then like older steps, you want to somehow like progressively get rid of them. So you might like truncate the older steps, or like all steps beyond some amount of context you just drop, or similar. Yeah, and when dropping stuff, you can also kind of condense it, so you can summarize like this was what was discussed, or this was what the agent did before. And yeah, the last one is memory is like a very big topic, similar to the maybe it can be similar to the key value store that Carlos talked about. But
what are your opinions on?
I think like I'd like to our product to do more with memory than it does right now. I think there's definitely like a lot of use cases where kind of letting the agent decide like what it wants to store and what it wants to store for the future is useful. Cool. And so that was all my slides. And I think one final note that I will add, which I found to be very useful when like building these types of things and thinking about like what kind of tools should I give an agent, and like how can I make like the agent solve this problem, is that and I mean, like what we're building here is not an agent for coding, but I still quite often like look at Claude Code, for example, and like what are the tools that Claude Code has? Like how would Claude Code solve the kind of equivalent problem in code? So for example, this like kind of making these like broad searches and then deciding to read some files like in more detail and so on. I think like there's a lot of like similar patterns to that that you can find in like other agentic tool in other contexts that can be quite useful. Cool. That was it from me.